as we get into what's going to be a message that you've probably heard. Well, I shouldn't say a message you've heard before, a verse that you've heard before that you're very familiar with. So I want to make sure that we don't tune out of what we're going to hear, what God's going to try and do through the words in this passage. And it's John 6, 15 through 21. And I'm titling this message, "Who Do You Say I Am?" Now, that actual phrase isn't found within John 6, 15 through 21, but the whole point of that entire passage really gets to, who do you say I am? And it's Jesus asking the disciples with the acts that he does, with the miracles that he does. And actually, one thing, too, before we get started, I wanted to just give a little shout-out to Valerie, too, because when I first started working here at Christ Church, I was helping out in the Welcome Center. That was like one of my first things to do, to plug into. And Valerie was there most of the time with me. And, man, she just made me feel so at peace and so at home here. And I work here, too. Like, isn't that kind of funny? Like, that's something that even people that work here need, right? So what I want to say with that is, if you're contemplating, should I get involved in that? I'm not plugged in yet. I don't know where my role is. Man, jump into that. Be in the Welcome Center. Be that person that can bridge the gap for somebody to allow them to feel comfortable, to feel at home, to feel at peace. But hey, that's a totally different subject than what we're talking about here today. We're in our Inspired series, and if you're new here, our Inspired series is going through all of the teaching and commands of Christ. And I love it because, like Jeff talked about in our communion thought, is when you know who Jesus really is, it totally radically changes your life. And so as we walk through this Inspired series, always getting to get little glimpses of who Jesus is, painting this holistic picture of his character and what he wants from us, not really messages that are left making you think, oh, who's Jesus really? I mean, we're focusing in on that like none other. And so I want to make sure that as you hear what we talk about today, that you hear that. And we're in the book of John. This is actually our first message in our Inspired series that's going to touch on the book of John. And I want to give you a little bit of background because I think that reading with context is probably the most important thing as you read through the Bible. Because if you read it without context, a lot of times it just feels like, I don't know if I'd say it, empty words. But I feel like that's kind of how it can be. If we don't know what the Bible is really trying to teach us within the passages we're reading, we can't really grasp onto the real full version of who Jesus is, all right? So let's walk through John here a little bit. It's going to pop up. Well, actually, I think just the phrase read with context. But if you take notes, this would be something to take, just to jot down, just to help you remember this. So the date that John was probably written was between 85 and 90 A.D., The writer is identified only as the disciple whom Jesus loved. So essentially, this is Jesus' best friend. And the person that Jesus was the closest with, that he confided in the most. And he was actually there with Jesus. So these are eyewitness accounts in all aspects of it. This is the most theological, and when I say that, hopefully that doesn't make you go, okay, time to tune out. Most theological. No, I really want you to grasp onto what John's going to try and tell us as we journey through it here in the next couple months. So it's the most theological of the four Gospels. It deals with the nature and person of Christ and the meaning of faith in him. John's presentation of Christ as the divine Son of God is seen in the titles given in the book. The Word was God. This is found in John 1, verse 1. The Lamb of God, the Messiah, the Son of God, the King of Israel, and the Savior of the world. And then Lord and God. This is also where we find, and what we're really going to be hitting on here today, the I am claims. And so if you're unfamiliar with any of this, I want to make sure that it ties into and can hit where everybody's at in their life, where everybody's at in their walk with Christ. We're going to be looking at these I am claims, and really the biggest aspect of those claims is that Jesus is literally saying, I am the God of the Bible, the Old Testament that you're familiar with. I am that fulfillment. I am those things. All the things that you were hoping for and all the things you didn't expect, I am those. And when we read the passage here, I'm going to have you stand with me in just a little bit. We'll be able to look through that here a little bit more clearly. And so to wrap it up, John's statement of the purpose of writing this is found in John 20, verse 30 through 31. It says, the gospel is sometimes called the book of 7 signs, since 7 miracles are recorded to reveal the person and mission of Jesus. And here they are. Here's the 7 miracles. If you want to take a snapshot of these. The first one, Jesus turns water into wine. Jesus heals the official's son. And I'm not going to touch on these because we're going to teach on some of these, but I just want to make sure that you see them. Because again, I think it's very important and powerful for us if we do a little study ahead of time sometimes, if we know what we're going to be hearing on a Sunday, it helps us dive even a little bit more deeper into it. Jesus heals the invalid at the pool, or the invalid, feeds the 5,000 plus in John 6, walks on water, which is our text here for today, gives the blind man sight in John 9, and then raises Lazarus from the dead, and that is John 11. So what's the point of all this? What's the purpose of this book of John? What's the purpose of me exploring all of these things for you here this morning? See, the purpose is the miracles. And it's not just that they happened, but it's who they came from that we need to focus on. So hear this. The purpose of these miracles is to see them, know Jesus, and believe in Jesus for your salvation, which is the greatest miracle of all of them. Take a look at this passage in John with me as we understand where this book is taking us, and don't quite stand here for it yet, but we will in a second. So this is John 20, 30 through 31. Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So here's our big idea this morning. And I said this the last time I preached. I'll give you the big idea because it's kind of, to me, it's like a conference. If you're going to a conference to learn something, you pick out a keynote speaker and you're like, I want to learn about that thing. So this is what we're learning about here today. The big idea. Our desire for life to play out our way keeps us focused on the little who, the what, when, and how, instead of the who. And I'm not talking about the band, all right? When I typed that out, I was like, oh, man, that looks, anyways. So we're focusing on the who. We're focusing on Jesus, not the circumstances in your life that are caused by people, which is the little who, the what happens to you, and when they happen. Because a lot of times we don't feel like that's good. We don't like it. So we all get caught up in things that we're distracted by. And if we would just focus on the actual who, life seems to play out a little bit differently, and not always in a good way, which is hard for us to comprehend, but it works out the way that it should, and it works out in a way that's going to be building and ultimately for the best in your life. So stand with me as we look at John 6, 15 through 21, and we're going to jump into this message here. It says, perceiving that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." That's a really important part right there. It is I, do not be afraid. Then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. All right, so let's go ahead and pray here real quick. God, we thank you so much for what you're doing in our lives. God, I pray that we can learn from this story of the storms in life, of the expectations in life, and ultimately see what you would have for us within all of those things. And God, I pray that you would just speak through me, and that these words would be your words and not mine. In Jesus' name, amen. Go ahead and take a seat. So, again, I told you we'd be familiar with this story. You've probably heard it before. Okay, Jesus walking on water. Again, that's why we showed the video of he calls it pog juice. It's orange juice. I don't know where that came from, but the little kid slipping on the juice. So we're talking about walking on water. And we see this story in 2 other books, Matthew and Mark. I'm going to read them real quickly for you because I think, hopefully, you'll be interested as I was that these stories are very different in the other books. That when John wrote this, he left out some things that we'd probably be pretty familiar with. And so I'm just going to touch on them real quick. It says in Matthew 14, 22 through 33, and these aren't going to be on the screen. I'm just telling them to you for the sake of us seeing the contrast here. It says, immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat. So we see Jesus telling them, get back into the boat. We don't see that in John 6. And then it says, after sending them home, he went to be up into the hills by himself to pray. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land. A strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. So if we skip down, this part in Matthew is where we see Peter actually step out of the boat and walk on water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. He alludes to that, but it doesn't really go into as much detail as Matthew does here, where he says, in fear, they cried out, it's a ghost. But Jesus spoke to them at once. Don't be afraid, he said. Take courage, I am here. Then Peter called to him, Lord, if it is really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water. Yes, come, Jesus said. So Peter went over to the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. And then we know the story of Peter loses focus. We're kind of talking about that a little bit today, but then he sings, Jesus rescues him, all that stuff. So Mark 6, 45 through 52. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat. Again, we see Jesus telling them, you got to get back into that. I need you guys to go away for a second. And John, he doesn't touch on that. It's kind of funny. Then it goes down, but Jesus spoke to them at once, do not be afraid. He said, take courage, I am here. Then he climbed into the boat, the wind stopped, and they were totally amazed. See, John doesn't talk about that either, that they were totally amazed. So what is John really trying to do here? He's leaving out all of these good things. I don't know if you're like me, but I love it when people give me communication, right? Like I love it when people give me details. It's actually something I'm not very good at. I just kind of blow through stuff. I think I heard maybe my wife laugh at that because she knows that I'm not great at that. No, but don't you love it when people give you everything? And when you hear sometimes, maybe sometimes it's not great. We get gossipy and all that stuff. Okay, but we're like, oh, give me more. Tell me. So how did that happen? How did that actually play out? What was her face like? What did he do after? We just want to know more, but John's like, no, I'm just giving you this. This is all you need to know here for today. And why is that? I don't know. I think it's something kind of cool. Let's take a look at it. So here's our next point. But who do you say that I am? So if Jesus claimed to be who the scriptures show him to be, then what do we do with that? How does that actually impact our lives? Because what Jesus claims is pretty radical, is pretty crazy. And I think what Jesus is really trying to get, or the clue that we can grasp, is in John 1:14. It says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We saw his glory as only of the begotten Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So John reports this miracle so that we can see Jesus' glory and that we can find him in the storms of life. I don't think he wants to overburden us with all of the other information. I think sometimes we do that too much for ourselves, right? We get a little too distracted. We have too many things going on. We have too many people that we're allowing to take up our time. And what I mean by time, I guess, is our emotional capacity, when we could be spending it for something else. And so, what happened with these disciples? Did they know what was going on? And I think we can find out that they really didn't. They thought that Jesus was going to be one way, and here's our next point. Confused and disappointed. Have you ever been confused? This is a rhetorical question. Have you ever been confused and disappointed in life? Yes. Okay, cool. But these disciples, and imagine this. The people that got to walk with Jesus were confused and disappointed that they got to walk with Jesus at this point in time. Isn't that kind of weird for us? They were actually waiting for Jesus to be something totally different than what he ended up being. And again, if you look at John, can you guys throw that back up there, the first verse in John, or the first passage, John 6? It's got verse 15 in there. The next one, sorry. So perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. So they had it all wrong. And this isn't just the disciples we're talking about. This is the group of people. Remember, he just fed 5,000 people with a couple loaves and a couple fish. And they're like, sweet, this is the guy that I've been waiting for. Now let's go make him king. Let's go take over the world. And God's like, no, I've got bigger plans than that. So I'm going to send all of you guys away. I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to regather myself. We see some humility here from Jesus, which I don't think we always recognize that he had that in those moments. But again, ask yourself, have you ever been confused and disappointed? Have you ever been confused and disappointed with God? Has he ever been something different in your life than you thought he was going to be? Maybe than you were taught he was going to be growing up or whatever it is, your preconceived notions on what God was going to do in the moment didn't play out the way that you were hoping it would. And so here's something else for us here this morning. It's Jesus is not a genie in a bottle or a Mr. Fix-It. Like, no wonder Jordan started out with a funny video, because these are all not like fun things that we're talking about, right? Jesus is not our genie in a bottle. He's not our Mr. Fix-It. And I think one of the biggest issues that we can have is when we treat Jesus as such. I don't think he withdraws from us like in this story, but I think we withdraw from him, right? When we view him that way. When we say, God, I'm going through this, just fix it, please, so that I don't have to deal with it. So I don't have to feel the stage or the season that I'm in. Just fix it. Take it away. And I don't think that that's a bad prayer. I think God wants to know our hearts, that he wants to know that we're hurting. I know he wants us to communicate our thoughts, our desires. Okay, but I guess just hear me on this. If we're so caught up in fix this for me, and we don't follow it up with, but God, whatever happens, I will glorify you. Whatever happens, I will glorify you. So where are you at here this morning? Do you maybe have a wrong view of who Jesus is, and that's keeping you from the truest relationship and the best relationship that you could ever have? And point number 2, Jesus wants you to know, or wants us to know, who he is. And I've got a couple bullets underneath that, and again, this would be something to write down. And I'm going to give you a couple stories throughout this too, that I've seen this really play out in my own life. So you call it point number 4, whatever, I don't know. I'm kind of crazy in my mind. I like divvy things up so weird. It might be hard to keep track notes-wise. But point A, we'll call it. We grow to know and trust Jesus person, so Jesus ownership person through the storms. This is a fascinating thing that I feel like I found in this, is that Jesus let his disciples struggle. He said, go, leave, get in the boat, go to Capernaum. I'm staying here. And then he let his disciples struggle. I think sometimes, again, and this is, well, I'll just tell you this story. Maybe this sums it up better. So I shared this a couple years ago. It was actually really like when I first started here at Christ Church. I had my dad over for dinner, and this was right when we had our second child, so now we've got 3, so, gosh, life is weird. It's crazy. It's going by fast. And I thought 2 was so crazy and so overwhelming. And then we thought it was good to have a 3rd one. No, I love them. It's so fun. I joke around about it, but I absolutely love it. So he's there. My dad's with me. I invited him over for dinner. Beth was working, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna show." I didn't say this. I'm gonna show you how good I am. I've got my 2 kids under control. I'm gonna feed the one because he's still on the bottle, and then I'm gonna get Tatum all situated. I'm gonna cook dinner for everybody. I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna make you proud of your son by all of the cool things that I'm gonna do here for you in the next couple hours. And how did that play out for me? Really well, let me tell you. It got to a point where, I think my blood pressure was probably through the roof. I probably had a fever from not being sick because I was so mad. And nothing was going well. I had burnt all the food that I was going to make. This was a couple years ago. I think Tatum pulled something, like a dresser down, not on herself, maybe I shouldn't tell you all these details. You're like, you're really not that good of a dad. Like, Brody's crying, and so I'm, like, trying to flip things with him here, and then my dad just, because I told him, like, hey, you're good, just watch, I think in an exasperated voice, just watch TV, it's fine, I got this. And I think he's just kind of laughing. He's trying to play with Tatum, help me out a little bit. And then he just walks over to me in the kitchen and just puts his hand on my shoulder and says, hey, I got this. See, he let me struggle for a little bit. I don't know if he meant to do that on purpose or if he was just honoring my wishes, right? So I don't know. Maybe God does that with us sometimes. Like, God, give me this thing. And he's like, I don't know. We get it. We struggle. And God lets us struggle for a little bit. And then he walks over to you, puts his hand on your shoulder, says, hey, I'm in the boat with you now. We got this. It was a super cool moment because, one, I didn't have to deal with the crying baby anymore. I think he actually took Brody and did all of the things that I was doing, but just way better. Isn't that weird? And I think, I don't remember, honestly. I think I just laid down on the couch and, like, fell asleep. I honestly don't know. I don't remember. I blocked it out. It was horrific. But, again, I hope that illustrates the point to you. And sometimes we ask God for things, and he lets us struggle, and it's defining his personhood, who he is to us. We're getting a little bit of his character there. He wants you to understand things, understand what you're looking for, and understand, are your priorities right? Here's our next point. We grow to know and trust Jesus' purpose in the storms. So what is Jesus' purpose through all of these things? Why do we struggle? Why do we go through things that we wish that we wouldn't? And again, I think sometimes we can get this idea so mixed up and maybe you've come from this background or maybe you're still in this spot where you hate the idea of religion or you hate the idea of God because you've been told all these lies about him and you said this would be, or people told you that life would be this way and it didn't play out that way and you're like, I don't want to have anything to do with God. It doesn't seem like a fun roller coaster to be on. So if we get this idea that when we're in the storms, God's working them together for our good, there's a little stipulation to it we'll explore here in a second, but if we understand that, then we understand Jesus' purpose, and that's to bring glory to himself and to bring other people to know him. It's a tough idea for us to wrap our minds around because our life is so much about us, right? If we go back to that big idea, our desire for life to play out our way, but God wants you to focus on his way and understand his purposes. I'm still figuring that out sometimes. I will be for the rest of my life, I think. This is point C. We grow to know and trust Jesus' providence in the storms. So what does that mean? What is Jesus' providence for me? It's not, and if we're talking about all these somewhat negative things, it can't be that Jesus is just going to make us rich and healthy, and obviously not. I mean, who's been sick in the last month? Don't raise your hand too high because maybe the people next to you will scoot away from you. My whole entire family got the flu. I didn't, and that was almost worse because I couldn't rest. I was, anyways. But again, I love my family. I love being able to do that with them. And we take turns of being sick and supporting each other, right? But I think everybody's gotten sick. I think everybody's struggled and I don't even just mean in their life. I mean in the last couple weeks, the whole town of Fountain Hills. Okay, but even still, the people have struggled financially. We've struggled relationally. We've struggled in life. So God's providence can't just mean that we're going to be blessed, happy, healthy, everything is going to work out the way that we want it to. I think what it means is that we have patience in adversity. We're thankful in our prosperities. And we have confidence in a future with a faithful God. And confidence in a future with a faithful God. That's what providence really means. And to me, it's there's the light at the end of the tunnel of my sickness. I know that I live for a faithful God. Maybe it doesn't heal the sickness the way that I would hope, or maybe I don't get better. Maybe life doesn't play out the way that it is, or that I would like for it to play out. But I have faith in a faithful God that he will carry those things to completion in the way that they should. Point D, to grow and know and trust Jesus' power in the storms. So we don't always understand why. Why does God save this person? Why does God heal that person? Why does God do this? Why does he do that? We don't always understand why, but we can trust his power and ask for it and communicate with him. Like I said earlier, it's tough if we're just like, God, do this for me. Give me that. Like my son Brody, every time I walk by him, he just asks me to pick him up. Up. I think we're like that sometimes. God, come on, right now. I'm going to just follow you around until you do it. All right? I think that's good, that we trust that God has power. Sometimes it's not going to work out the way that we want it to. But we know that God's got power to do amazing things, and we pray for that in Jesus' name when we're faced up against those adversity. Also knowing that the end part of that needs to be, God, whatever your purposes are, whatever your glory is, for the betterment of your kingdom, not just for mine. This is our last one before we kind of wrap up here. We grow to know and trust Jesus' presence in the storms. Again, who's been through a storm? I'm asking a lot of rhetorical questions here. Who's been through a storm in life, right? Who's struggled? Who's going through a storm right now? I think all of us in maybe one way or another. This may be another miracle that John's trying to explain to us, but it just kind of gets swept under the rug, is that Jesus gets into the boat, he's there with the disciples, and then it says that they get to where they're going right away, immediately. I was like, that seems kind of weird. And I didn't put a map up there, but I'm just going to explain it to you. So the place that they were and the place they were going to is about 8 to 10 miles away. And it says in the story that they rode for about 3 to 4 miles. And then Jesus walks onto the boat. I don't know. That's like, he must have been walking fast. I don't know. I don't know how he got there so quick. I don't feel like I can walk as fast as people row, but Jesus shows up. He's in the boat with them now. And then it says immediately they were where they were supposed to go. Now, I'm going to bring it back to the story of my dad. It was crazy. I was struggling through all this stuff, trying to make it all happen, trying to do it so well. And then he just came over, put his hand on my shoulder, said, I got this. And then like 5 minutes, the thing I was doing for an hour is done, completed, we're there. See, I think that in the midst of our storms, trying to navigate it ourselves, we are so fixated on the storm and not the who, that we don't realize that God's actually taking you to where you need to go. And then boom, when you fix your eyes in the right spot, he's got you exactly where he wants you to be. Now, does that mean that you're at the end of the suffering? No, I don't think so. Because there's a lot of mature Christians that still are going through things, right? A lot of people that know that I need to have my eyes fixed on Jesus, and you still go through things. Just because you remembered, okay, I'm not going to focus on this, I'm going to focus here, doesn't mean that it's done. The storm's not over with always in our life, but God's got you exactly where he wants you to be. So again, our big idea, our desire for life to play out our way keeps us focused on the who, the what, and the when instead of how, and the how instead of the who, the ultimate who. So I want you guys to ask yourselves these questions. What does this mean for us? So who is Jesus to you? Like honestly, you don't need to write these down. I'm going to actually have you guys write something down here in just a second. Don't be mad at me for making you do homework. But who is Jesus to you? Job 9:8 says this, and I think I have it. Did I give it to you guys? I believe so. Yes. He alone has spread out the heavens and marches on the waves of the sea. This is an Old Testament passage referencing Jesus. This is kind of a crazy thing. So who is Jesus to you? Is he just a teacher? Is he just somebody that the Christian faith is fantasized about and they're just so wackadoodle? And I'm just here because somebody's making me be here. Now, who is Jesus to you? I want you to be honest with yourself. I think in my life, and still, there's times where it's like, man, how is Jesus like that? How is that? Like, I can't comprehend it. I'm not going to fully, I don't know if we do. It's a question we got to keep asking ourselves. And this passage or this verse, I hope, shows you, man, Jesus is all that the Bible talks about him being. If you don't know who he is, read it. It'll show you. Your life will be so different. And then Exodus, did I say Exodus? I meant Job. I might have said, anyways. Exodus 3:14. God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. So it's kind of weird. And I know in the passage it says, it is I, that we read, it says, it is I, do not be afraid. If you look at the translation of it, where it comes from, it's the same exact wording as it has right here in Exodus. So Jesus is telling them, don't be afraid. It is I. I am the God of the Bible. I am that person that it's talking about. That's me. Quit looking. Quit looking for an earthly ruler. Quit looking for the person that's just going to fix your issues at work or your issues with your kids or your issues with that or be your genie in a magic bottle. Okay, I am greater than that. And my purposes are greater than that. So who is Jesus to you? And do you get it? Where's your heart? Be honest with yourself here this morning. And then is Jesus on your boat? Is he taking you where he needs you to go? Or is it, because I think one of the biggest lies that we can tell ourselves is that Jesus is our copilot. Right? I think Trent and Keith talk about this all the time. Jesus isn't your copilot, because if he is, I'm steering the boat this way and he's trying to go that way. Okay? Jesus is your pilot. Is he in your boat? Is he directing you? Are you going to him for everything that you need? And that might be countercultural to us, because we expect, in an American society, we expect to be good enough. We expect to be good at what we're doing. We expect to have all the answers. We don't want people to see us fail. Yeah, are you waiting for Jesus to show up like he used to? This is not my, I'm going to make it my last point here before we do our little writing exercise. I don't mean to say, it's kind of funny. It's my first sermon as an associate pastor, and it's lucky that I'm sick because it makes my voice sound deeper. So I'm a little bit more mature. But it makes it sound ominous sometimes, too. I don't mean for it, but there's just a thought that popped in my head. I'm really sorry that you guys have to deal with that. So are you waiting for Jesus to show up like he used to? So we see this a lot in student ministry, where we go to camps, and people have this mountaintop experience, and then they get back from camp, and it's like, maybe this happened in your life. We've got a worship night coming up, April 28th. It's going to be an amazing experience. It's going to be an amazing time. But if that's like, man, can we have another worship night? Can we have another this? Like, God just really got to me there. I think we're waiting for God to show up like he used to. And if we look at Isaiah 43:15 through 19, and this is, I think, really what Jesus was trying to do with the disciples and the people when he said, go away from me. I'm not going to be your earthly king. I'm not going to conquer the Roman Empire the way that you want me to. My plans are bigger than that. I'm not just going to show up like this every single time. So let's look at this. Isaiah 43:15 through 19. I am the Lord, your Holy One, Israel's creator, your king. I am the Lord who opened a way through the waters, making a dry path through the sea. Another little water thing. There's another passage, right? There we go. I called forth the mighty army of Egypt with all of its chariots and horses. I drew them beneath the waves, and they drowned their lives, their lives snuffed out like a smoldering candle wick. But forget all that. So this is referencing what Jesus did with Moses, with the people of Israel. He's saying, I did all that, but forget it. I'm doing something new. So if you're waiting for God to show up like he used to in your life, maybe it was through, maybe I'm getting too personal for you here. Well. Keith's my boss, so you can take it up with him. Maybe it's somebody who communicates the word of God that you're like, I just can't hear it from anybody else the same way. I can only listen. That's how I'm going to grow. Or I can only when I go to camp, it's just so much better. When I do this, it's just so much better. Only if I'm in a life group with these people can I actually grow. Man, I'm so guilty of those things. Maybe you are too. Maybe you don't relate with that, and I just need to grow up a little bit. Okay, but quit waiting for God to show up like he used to. God's saying, I'm doing a new thing in your life. I'm going to give you new people to impact. I'm going to impact you with new people. I'm going to give you a new mission to take on. So think about this. What did God save you for? I think a lot of times God saves us. We meet Jesus. We're like, sweet. I'm a Christian now. It's pretty awesome. And then that's it. What did God save you for? He didn't just save you from something. He didn't just rescue you from your addiction or from your bad habit, the thing you were lost in, whatever it is. He didn't just rescue you from that. He saved you for something. What did he save you for? Ask yourself that question here this morning. How are you impacting people? Are you missing the significance the significance of your situations? And are you just fixated on the bad and the wrong? Or is God doing something cool in your life? And for the sake of time, we're going to just jump to this last part. I want to give you a little exercise. It shouldn't take too long. I think it's important, though, because here's what's true, is that when we hear something, usually we forget. If it's a sermon on Sunday, we forget 90% of it on Tuesday, yada, yada, yada. What I want to do here this morning is hopefully this is a take-home for you that's real, that's tangible, that you can look back on, whether it's Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 months from now, and you can ask yourself, did I do these things? We're going to take some actionable steps here this morning and work on, do I know who Jesus is? Can I answer the question, who do you say I am? And here's the take home. And so there's a connection cards in the seat back pocket in front of you. If you don't all grab one, I'm just going to ignore it and just assume that you did anyways. No, I'm just kidding. If you want to do this on your phone, that's fine. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. This is for you. If you want to be able to take something home today and ask yourself these questions and write down the answers, we're going to play some music for you here. You guys can go ahead and just get it going right now. And then in a second, I'm going to show you a music video that I think hopefully will encourage you as you head out here this morning. So take home. Do you believe it? Do you believe that God is who he says that he is, that Jesus came to rescue your life, to save your life, to change your life? And do you believe that he's the God of the Bible? You can put yes, no, whatever you want to put. Maybe, figuring it out. Where has God triumphed in your life? And I'm asking these questions basically the same way twice because you can just answer one of them. Where has God triumphed in your life? And how can you impact? Because it's not just that he triumphed. It's that he triumphed for a purpose, for you to go and change somebody else's life, to go and impact somebody. How can you impact the lives of those around you because of that? And this is, again, it's the same kind of question. What storm has God settled in your life? So maybe it's not a triumph, but maybe God just he walked over, he put his hand on your shoulder, and he said, I've got this, I'm here. What has he settled in your life? That, again, the storm's not over, the triumph isn't done, okay, but I'm confident in a holy God and in a faithful God that I'm good, that I've got patience in adversity, that I've got all these things that I need. Then what storm or battle are you in right now that you need to slow down with and allow Jesus, God with us, to walk into it with you? So what are you going through right now? We've talked about what are we conquering? What has God done? We need to remind ourselves that sometimes. What has God done? And then what are you in right now that God needs to be a part of because you're trying to be co-pilot with him instead of just letting him? I'm going to give you a couple seconds to just fill that out if you are. And then we're going to watch a video here. You guys can turn down the music just a little bit. And the reason why I'm showing you guys this video, one is because I didn't find it until like Friday, and so I wasn't going to be like, hey, worship team, can you guys play this song? It's new. You got a couple days. Can you figure it out? I didn't want to do that to him, but I think it's so powerful for us here this morning that I want you to hear it. And if anything, if you're like, this didn't apply to me, it didn't hit me, now at least you know one more cool worship song, and that's fun. So Zephaniah 3:17 says this, God is rejoicing over us with songs. He is always singing, and our prayer is that we'll be able to be still enough to understand that God is literally singing songs over you, that he is who he says that he is, and that we just need to listen to where he's directing us. So let's go ahead and just watch this music video real quick. All right. So maybe you're not like me. I love music. I think that it really helps me, tie into sometimes what God's trying to show me. And so I hope that song is impactful for you. But here's really the biggest reason why I shared it. It hit every point that I had in my sermon. It was like crazy to me that I found it after I had written all of this. And I was like, man, I love that song. Like, it's every point that I basically said in that song. And so I don't know what you're going through here this morning. I don't know what your view is of God, but ask yourself, who is Jesus? Who is he in your life? Do you understand that he is who he says that he is, that he's the God of the whole Bible, that he sums up everything, that is all him, it's all about him? Your life is that way too. Maybe you're like, man, so many people keep trying to introduce, like Jesus keeps popping up, and I want to get away from it. Why does that keep happening? But man, I think God's just trying to get to you, just trying to chase you down, just trying to show you the life that you've always wanted, that you didn't even know you wanted.